Good morning, everyone. Friends from around the state. Really good to see everybody. I'm going to let folks kind of stream on in while I say a slow hello. Welcome to the 43rd meeting of LERN. I'm Angie Hacker, the statewide best practices coordinator with the California Climate and Energy Collaborative. Actually, coming to you today from back east. I'm on vacation. And I'm choosing to be with you all. So I'd like to hang out. Speaking of which, we just took last month off. So hopefully that wasn't confusing to you, but we took July off because a lot of us were together. Almost more than 600 people tried registering for this SEEK forum of ours. We came together in San Jose for our 16th annual forum. So good to be in person with so many of you. Give me an emoji or something if you were there. And we're able to spend some time together in person, which was super needed. If you did register, you're going to soon get some post-forum information, including some of the resources and materials. You'll get a take on my takeaways. And if you read that, I'd love to hear you comment on what your takeaways were. But thanks for all of you if you did go and provided some feedback in the survey that followed the event. We're already at work trying to figure out how to make SEEK Week, which is what I started calling it, even better next year. So as we roll up here, I'll just say I'm also joined here today by Rochelle and Kelsey with the SEEK team. You can always reach out to them with any needs. And we would love if you would introduce yourself over chat as we get going here. Let us know where you're hailing from today. Okay. So as always, these meetings are designed to help you access opportunities that you can use to advance your local energy and climate goals. As we have for the last few months, sometimes we bring your attention to some underlying policy movements that affect your energy and climate funding and your ability to do the work and all the prospects. So we'll do that a little bit today. In fact, today we have a couple of speakers coming to us from two different organizations. They're going to share federal budget and tax credit updates and some insights into how other states are identifying energy and climate investments. So we've got the Center for Budget Policy Priorities and S2 strategies that are going to give us some really good insights on what's going on at the federal level. And that'll happen a little bit later. First, I'm going to do what I always do and run through some timely opportunities, and we'll spend a few minutes just spotlighting an input opportunity on SB 100, the Joint Agency Report being led by CEC. So that's the plan for today. Let's go ahead and dive in as you guys are still introducing yourselves. And also in the chat, I want to welcome you. So this is our opportunity roundtable. And as always, we would love if you know of something that the rest of the folks on the call would benefit from knowing about. So that might look like funding or other assistance or an opportunity to provide input. Drop it in the chat. We like to mine the hive brain here for everybody's benefit. This is the hyperlink cheat sheet that you'll get all these slides after the event today, so don't get stressed about taking notes. You'll also see Kelsey and Rochelle dropping links in the chat to some of these things that we walk through. I'm going to focus on the highlighted programs. There's quite a few, so that should be encouraging. If you have questions throughout, you can always throw those questions in the chat. So, just to kick off a little bit on like funding news and policy, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We talk about it here because, your ability to do your place-based work is incredibly affected by policy and the investments that it drives. So we know you don't do your work in a vacuum. On the state level, additional state budget bills, we talked about the budget a couple of meetings ago, which SB and AB 102 have passed. It's not the end of the road when it comes to the state budget. So there are more budget bills, either budget bill juniors or budget trailer bills expected to follow AB 102. And some of us are really eager to see what that looks like for GGRF, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund reauthorization, as well as more details on Prop 4 spending. A lot of folks I'm in touch with are really hoping we're sort of diving in and being interested in the $1 billion that Prop 4 originating statute had anticipated would go towards technical assistance. So that's TA to support the rest of the $9 billion under Prop 4. and hoping to see some of that become accessible to those of you that are doing capacity work within your regions, basically making the case that you're not just recipients of TA, but you're also really good providers. So more on that. I also see, a couple interesting movements here, so maybe some decent news, but folks are trying to keep their heads on straight. So stay clear-minded and realistic about what may appear to be some decent news. Some optimism, I think, around rulings and legislation related to NEM 3.0, but don't mean it's been changed yet or will be. And some exception folks are looking at AB 306 or AB 130 on building codes and finding some optimism around exceptions and how that might provide a pathway for building codes to continue at the local level. And I did drop, there's an article here from Canary, if you didn't already see it, talking a little bit about that. And then there's a lot happening at the federal level, major changes underway, I would say, to grant making, both in the big federal bill, HR 1, which you probably hear about all the time. We're going to dive into that a little bit today with our speakers and just talk about the implications of that bill. And also there's implications on just federal grant making processes as well. And then there came out recently, just last week on August 7th, an executive order, and that was on improving oversight of federal grant making, which has a lot of implications on future access or accessibility to federal awards, and just changes the process around some folks thinking it's sort of politicizing discretionary awards. So we're going to hear from our speakers a little bit more information about that, just to give you a heads up on what sort of the outlook on federal funding might look like. Okay, so there are some grants we want to walk through. And so the first one here that I've got highlighted is from the California Energy Commission. It's the Advanced Grid Technology Acceleration Project. So that's the EPIC from the EPIC program. It's due on September 5th, and there's $24 million total funding available. The award amount would be between $4 million and $12 million. All public and private entities, with the exception of local publicly owned utilities, are eligible. And the point of it is to fund technology demonstration projects that validate the performance and benefits of advanced grid technologies while performing funding deployment. So eligible activities are all around those that demonstrate advanced grid technology in real world utility operations. So it may be that in community you have sites that might be good candidates for something like this, or you're really interested in kind of being on the leading edge of some of this technology research and development. There's another one here. This one is federal. Interesting. This one is from the Department of Transportation, Rural and Tribal Assistance Pilot Program grants, due September 8th. And it's on a first come, first serve basis. Their award amounts range from $250 to $2.5 million. Local governments and state governments are eligible. They do have to be in certain census tract designated areas that are not urban. And the purpose is to advance infrastructure projects in rural and tribal communities. So I'm bringing it up here because those of you that are working on energy might think of energy infrastructure, or maybe there's some climate infrastructure necessary. And so things like financial services, technical services, legal services are the kinds of things that are eligible for. Actually, this one is specifically transportation. So maybe scratch what I said about energy. Okay, so another one here. I'm putting this one up. I just, we're looking under all rocks. California Jobs First. I know a lot of you, that used to be called Community Economic Resilience Fund. And these are, there's 13 regions throughout the state. I'm bringing one up that I know has an eligible funding opportunity for its specific region. So that's the Southern Border Coalition, but there may be others. Right now, most of the regions have gone through a pre-development funding round already. And this particular region has a round 2 happening in September, but it's just one I want to make sure, every region has a California First regional administrator, and you may just want to loop in with it and keep track of it as funding opportunities become available. This one, for example, is community-driven project ideas that turn shared goals identified in the regional plan for that region into projects, basically. So looking to implement some of the things that were developed in the plan, the sort of originating plans. And so, yeah, this one varies from, looks like a few $100,000 or a few tens of thousands of dollars up to $400,000. Okay, so another one here from Cal OES. So this is for folks, if you're maybe this is more leaning on climate resilience side of things, but I would say there's a lot of stuff on energy resilience that could potentially go into something like a hazard mitigation grant fund. A lot of you know that hazard mitigation plans are necessary to access federal disaster dollars. So the funding in this case would be, the application would be due September 15th to Cal OES. This is federal flow down dollars through the state. And so the purpose of this is to provide support for communities to implement mitigation activities to reduce risk to life and property from natural hazards. So natural hazards could include things that you might be thinking about with climate change, like drought and extreme weather and flooding. And so it pays for things like capacity building, planning, codes and standards, and shovel-ready and phase mitigation projects. Interesting news here too with a related program. I don't know if you saw the news, but there was a court ruling around preventing the federal administration from diverting disaster prevention grants related to another program here. So BRIC, Building Resilience grants. And so that was, some folks felt like that was some optimistic news, that maybe the BRIC grants were completely gone, but perhaps they're not. And maybe our speakers today will let us know if they've heard anything differently. Another opportunity here through the Center for Sustainable Energy. This is, I believe, with some CEC dollars. It's for the Fast Charge California Project 1. This is available not just to folks like you, community serving organizations, local governments, but I think private folks as well. Due September 30th, there's $55 million available here, and the purpose is to provide incentives for the installation of high-power DC fast chargers at publicly accessible sites across California. And the incentives amounts are ranging here, $55,000 per charging port for a 150 kilowatt system versus $100,000 incentive cap per charging port for a 275 kilowatt system. The next one here you'll notice is in red, which is just sort of like a little bit of a red flag here. You might have heard the news about Solar for All, which sounds like it may be in jeopardy. Solar for All was a federal program down from the EPA, which is now experiencing federal challenges like many other programs, but we did have a pretty big award here in California that was being administered through PUC, CEC, and EDD. So there was this opportunity through EDD, economic development, for its portion of the California Solar for All. And I'd be interested if anybody else has intel on this. I see that some of the materials are missing right now. I wonder if it may be paused. So just sort of a lookout for this one because it's moving. Lawyers for Good Government, our friends that we've had come speak to us, tell us that the clawback of these dollars was I think there's going to be some evaluation about the legality of it, but I think for now it's uncertain. There's one here from the CEC, the next one, Energize. It's transit set-aside funding, which would be due on October 2nd. It's $544 million for various funding lanes, what they call it. You would be eligible for this application if you are a tribe, a city or county, or have been included in CARB's Innovation Clean Transit Program. And the purpose of it is the Energy Infrastructure Incentives for Zero Emission Commercial Vehicles project is a block grant designed to rapidly deploy funds to support the increase in deployment of zero emission vehicle infrastructure in California to meet state and clean energy or clean transportation goals. So it's up to $14 million for community microgrid projects for management, engineering, and development costs. up to $3 million for special facility related costs, up to $1 million for interconnection related costs, up to $25,000 for application development related costs. And so you could be a community-based organization, local or tribal government, or third-party developer. Okay. Another one here for folks in, we'll lift up things that are regional when we can. SCE does have its microgrid incentive program available. It's a competitive program providing funding to communities facing outages, power shutoffs, and other events driven by climate change. And so this funding is specifically for community microgrids. And we'll just drop the link here so you can learn a little bit more about that one if you're in the region. So that's a lot of the general funding opportunities. The other ones are under other assistance. There's one here that's it's a specific incentive for homes, low income households. So that's why we put it in sort of a different category. You may not be directly eligible for it, but you may want to pass the word on to your low income residents. So self-generation incentive program, energy storage incentives for low income homes, up to $280 million available right now. And this is for basically pairing energy storage with solar technology in low income homes. There's various incentive structures here and more information that you can find on the link. Okay, then just a couple of other things is just around input opportunities. LCI, that's the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, has a couple of listening sessions are going to be running, one on extreme heat and community resilience on August 12th, so that's today, and then an update on California's extreme heat action plan. So they just wanted to pass the word on to you if you're interested in extreme heat. They have a couple of opportunities for engagement. We're going to talk next for a moment about SB 100 Joint Agency Report, Implementation Challenges and Opportunities, which they are accepting comments for right now. And then I just wanted to highlight this, and I should have put the link here, and I will. The California Economic Outlook is happening October 21st to 23rd. It'll be in Stockton this year, but there's a lot of talk there that's going to be, I think, relevant for a lot of you if you're in the area or can make it, on regionalism and energy as an economic development sector. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I'm just going to do a quick run through of this. And so maybe Rochelle or Kelsey, if you can drop that one link I've got here. We're not going to spend too much time on this. I just wanted you to know, if you were at SLEEK on July 9th, we did have a speaker from CEC that talked to us about SB 100 Joint Agency Report. They are doing their section on implementation challenges and opportunities. This report is an important one, and I wanted to make sure we chimed in on it, and a lot of you did live. The report is an analysis that considers hypothetical future scenarios to feasibly achieve SB 100's clean energy goals reliably, equitably, and affordably. And so what they want is to learn a little bit more about the barriers to getting to the state's ambitious clean energy transition goals. That's 100% clean energy electricity policy. And so they do these reports every 4 years. So we did a listening session. We learned a lot. This is a draft of some comments that I'm beginning to prepare. It's inclusive of what we heard on the 9th, but it also includes what we've been hearing for really the 2.5 years we've been running the state and local energy and climate coordination meetings, and just really deeply listening to what folks like you are saying are your barriers to achieving a clean energy future in terms of implementation, and then opportunities as well. It is not done, but I would encourage you to look at it because there's, I think, 10 or 11 barriers. That's how I'm structuring it. And I'm curious, folks like you, if you've got a moment to get in there, you could just comment right in here if you'd like. I'd be interested in what you have to say. If you have anything to add, specifically if I missed anything, if I missed a key barrier that you want to make sure we, you as communities have a chance to lift up to the CEC as they're writing this section in the report, I think they would really appreciate it. They've asked for our help compiling. So I just want to encourage you to take a peek at this. And if we have time in the bonus breakout, I'll pull it up and we can walk through what those 10 or 11 barriers are. Also, you have an opportunity if you want to do comments yourself. You can go ahead and submit to the docket directly if you want to tell the CEC what kind of barriers you're experiencing. Okay. Well, thank you for anybody who's interested in helping on that. So let's go ahead and dive into our speakers of the day. We're really honored and appreciative to have two speakers that are going to join us. Our first speaker is Michaela Tahoe. Did I say it? Is it Tajo or Tahoe?
Tahoe, that was great.
Oh, good. Okay. I should have asked beforehand. So thanks, Michaela, for being here. She's a climate policy analyst on the federal fiscal policy team for the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. You might remember about 6 months ago, we had a colleague of hers, Rachel, come and talk to us and try to give us some insights about what we were about to face with the new federal administration. And so now we're doing this like mid-year check-in and really see how the rubber is hitting the road with the new federal administration on budget. And then we're going to hear a little bit more of a deep dive with Sandie on tax credits and guidance. So I'll leave it to you, Michaela. Thanks so much. And then as folks have questions, please drop them in the chat and we'll get to those after both speakers.
Thanks, Angie, for that introduction. So, hi, everyone. My name is Michaela. As Angie shared, I am the climate policy analyst at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Rachel has previously presented to you all on federal climate funding, so I'm hoping to go over some updates on the federal climate funding landscape, as well as share some insights and resources I've seen from partners. Next slide, please. We have a lot of content to go over in the next 20 minutes, so I'm hoping to cover things at a little high level and hopefully give you all an overview of what the federal climate funding landscape looks like. And the slides will be shared with you afterwards, and they have, more resources. Next slide, please. Taking a step back, CBPP, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, is a DC-based research organization. We focus on fiscal and budgetary policy. We do that through policy research and advocacy at the federal and state levels. Our climate work is mostly focused on IRA defense and supporting a cohort of state fiscal policy organizations to advance just and equitable climate spending. The California Budget and Policy Center is not in our climate cohort specifically, but they are a part of this group of 40 state, DC and Puerto Rico fiscal research organizations. Next slide, please. Oh, one more slide. Thank you. So at a high level, how has federal climate funding changed since Rachel last talked to you in January, February? First, we've seen significant rescissions to federal climate funding. H.R. 1 cut unobligated funds for many of the federal climate programs funded by the IRA. However, a lot of that funding has already gone out the door and several programs were left untouched. We've also seen significant phase-outs and changes to the clean energy tax credits. By doing this, the law essentially repeals the clean energy tax credits by changing the credits phase-outs and creating harsh new restrictions. My colleague Sandie will be going over that in much more detail. We're also seeing continued administrative actions that might make implementation of remaining climate funds and tax incentives more difficult, like a continued IRS hiring freeze, new executive orders, and potential rules from the EPA and Treasury. Next slide, please. So, as I said, H.R. 1 cut unobligated funds for several IRA programs, including the Department of Energy's Energy Grant and Loan programs, funding for air pollution, environmental justice, for environmental reviews, and the neighborhood access and equity grants. The percentages here show how much of that funding has already been obligated. So you can see a majority of the funding has already been obligated for a lot of IRA programs. If you go to the next slide, please. We also saw that several IRA programs were left untouched, such as the Energy Efficiency Rebate Program and funding for tribes. That being said, even if funding is obligated or wasn't included in H.R. 1 cuts, the threats for cancellations, pauses, and scrutiny is still very real. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the chart to the right. It's from Heat Map News, and it shows that over 66% of funds from the IRA were already obligated by June, especially from the EPA and NOAA. That being said, with the grant cancellations that are happening, states, local governments, nonprofits, and other coalitions have been able to successfully sue the federal government to put a pause on some of these grant cancellations and even unfreeze some funds. So, Angie, earlier you had mentioned the BRIC program. Just earlier this month, a federal court has temporarily blocked the Trump administration from reallocating the BRIC funds after 20 states sued the administration for canceling the BRIC funding. So Yes, I see the applause. Agreed. There are organizations like Lawyer for Good Government or L4GG that are providing support for organizations who are navigating grant cancellations, and I'll share a bit more about that at the end. And outside of litigation, lifting up success stories of the impacts of the funding, how much money they're saving, how much money is potentially lost if these funds are canceled, that's critical. Even if you can't make a legislator change the vote, you can make it hurt for them when they vote in a way that hurts us. And then next slide, please. So those were the grant cancellations. HR 1 also made significant changes to the clean energy tax credits. Like I said, Sandie will be going over this in much more detail, but this chart shows how some of the changes to the phase outs for tax credits for wind, solar, manufacturing, and the consumer credits like EVs and energy efficiency upgrades. If you go to the next slide, HR 1 also implemented significant restrictions on the credits based on the ownership of projects, payments, and materials associated with the projects and the entities that own them. Again, I'll let Sandie go into further detail here. And the big takeaway is for local government officials, state officials, nonprofits that are using direct pay. The good news is that direct pay wasn't touched by the IRA, and neither were the bonus credits, right, that incentivize investment in low-income communities. They weren't repealed. However, the underlying credits that are used by direct pay entities have been shortened and have had restrictions placed on them, which does restrict direct pay. And then if you go to the next slide, please. As Angie shared, there's also been significant executive action that have impacted the federal funding landscape. So there have been several, but wanted to share two more recent ones. The one Angie brought up, the improving oversight of federal grant making, adds new layers of review and approval from a senior appointee for all new grant solicitations and discretionary awards. It also makes grant terminations easier for new grants, as well as potentially revising contracted grants to allow for easier termination. They're doing this by adding a termination for convenience clause, which would allow an agency to terminate a grant if it doesn't align with the agency's goals. So in the next 30 days, we'll have each agency reviewing the grants and term conditions of the agency, the status of the discretionary awards, and we might even see some grantees having to provide written explanations as they draw down their funds. Again, we're not 100% sure what implementation of this executive order will look like, but we'll likely see a short-term pause of new grant opportunities and even some slowing down of funds. I'd actually love some insight from you all. If any of you have an active grant with the federal government in the Q&A, I'd love to hear if you're experiencing any issues with accessing grants. The other executive order I want to lift up is the Ending Market Distortion Subsidies. This executive order targets wind and solar projects. It emphasizes the scrutiny and the kind of the enforcement of rules that these clean energy projects will have to navigate, especially for the foreign entity rules and the beginning of construction rules. I've also heard from folks that this might indicate that the Treasury might modify some of the beginning of construction rules, which will, I think, just make uptake of these credits a little bit more confusing. So next slide, please. What does this all mean for local governments? I know Sandie will be going more into detail a bit, but especially in the next few months, it is all hands on deck for local and state governments working with private and public partners to leverage the tax credits, especially ones that have longer runways. As technical assistance from national partners like L4GG, S2 Strategies, release resources, understanding how projects in your community's pipeline will be affected by these rule changes is super important. Okay, next slide, please. That was all about reconciliation. Now we talk about appropriations. So this slide shows the timeline for appropriations that we're currently in. The green is what we're kind of going through, and the blue is like what still has to happen. We've already seen the president's budget request in May, and there were significant cuts to offices and programs for climate funding. But as a reminder, the president's budget request is just a request. It is ultimately up to Congress, who decides how appropriations for discretionary funding actually looks. So as you can see from this slide, we're in the process of appropriations subcommittees in the House and Senate marking up and passing their bills. For reference, discretionary funding is split into 12 bills with the different subcommittees. In order to avoid a shutdown, Congress must pass and the president must sign a budget bill or a continuing resolution or a mix of both for all the agencies by September 30th. So in the next slide, I have what we've seen thus far. I won't go into all of it, but like I said, this will be shared with you and you can look closer. What we've seen thus far varies by budget, but again, House, Senate, President have to ultimately agree on the budget by the end of September in order to avoid a shutdown. From the president's budget, we've seen significant cuts to federal climate funding, including zeroing out the low-income home energy assistance program, as well as drastic cuts to the EPA and DOE's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, which funds a lot of the state and community energy programs. We are seeing similarly harsh cuts from the House budget, and slightly less harsh cuts from the Senate. But like I said, we have yet to see several subcommittees markups. For the House, we're still missing the labor HHS education bill. For the Senate, we've seen markups for commerce and justice, labor, HHS, environment, but haven't had a full vote from the Senate yet. So kind of the biggest takeaway of the appropriations and the budget process is that what the final appropriation bill or bills could look like might vary. We might see another short-term continuing resolution where programs might be funded at FY 2025 levels. That would be called a clean continuing resolution. And we might see final full year funding for some agencies. Congress will kind of continue the budget process when they return in September. They weren't able to get through all of the subcommittees before August recess. But in the meantime, advocacy, especially as members are in their communities, in their homes, is especially important at this time. If you go to the next slide, please. So what? What does all of the chaos of the federal government mean for you, those who care about clean energy in your communities? I know I speak for so many folks working on the federal level that the momentum for clean energy is very real and very tangible in the local and state level. So here are some takeaways and suggestions I've heard from folks. First is encouraging continued uptake of available funds, such as the Home Energy Efficiency Rebate Program and the tax credits. Consider focusing on products and projects that have immediate impacts or shorter build times, like behind-the-meter storage. Fast-tracking direct pay eligible projects, working across the state, local, and private agencies to prioritize clean energy projects, streamline procurement procedures, environmental reviews, and other permitting requirements when possible. For example, in Maine, the Public Utilities Commission, the state utility regulators are fast-tracking plans to procure nearly 1,600 gigawatts of renewable energy. They recently announced an RFP for cost-effective renewable energy projects that would account for 13% of the state's electricity usage. These regulatory efforts are working in tandem with the state and executive branch. In June, Governor Mills of Maine signed LD 1868, which codifies the state's requirement to use 100% clean energy by 2040. Likewise, local governments can release RFIs and RFPs and work with state governments to build project pipelines, to aggregate and pre-approve potential products, learn about local gaps and opportunities, and provide targeted support. For example, the New York Power Authority, they sent out a request in March to find pre-qualifying renewable development companies and investors to meet the requirements to collaborate, to collaborate with the Power Authority on developing clean projects. Through this process, they were able to release an updated strategic plan that considers 61 individual projects that total nearly 7 gigawatts of solar and wind energy and energy storage capacity. So by reviewing eligible projects, they were able to build out a more comprehensive strategic plan. And on building on and leveraging resources and capacity built from the Inflation Reduction Act. Many nonprofits, coalitions, businesses, local governments, state governments, and developers applied for IRA funding and were not selected. Many of the IRA grants were oversubscribed, as in there was more desire and potential projects than there was funding available. There are hundreds of high-impact, well-developed, clean energy projects that need funding. In the next slide, I'll share a resource from RMI that consolidates. Oh, sorry, could you actually go back? Thank you. I'll share this resource that consolidates some of the projects from the CPRG grant program. And these projects are great. They've already done the place-based impact analysis. They've made the connections. They've done the pre-work that makes them a successful project. And easier said than done, but developing state and local financial incentives like standing up green banks. Many states do not yet have a green bank and could work with local and state financial institutions to build capacity for clean energy. Local governments can also develop financial products to help encourage private investment or uptake state funding. For example, in Maryland, they just announced a $64 million grant to help local governments build sustainable clean energy and energy efficient projects. And the final word of advice is just avoiding orphan projects, working with projects by defending against clawbacks, making it aware that there are delays for obligated federal funds and identifying alternatives to federal funding. And last slide, please. All right, as I promised, a few resources. I'm not going to go over all of them, but you should be able to click on the links once the slide is shared. For navigating the impacts of HR 1 and the new rules, I have resources listed from the NYU Tax Law Center, S3 Strategies, and other organizations. They're very helpful. I also added CVPP's Executive Action Watch Tracker, which shares analysis of relevant EOs, DOGE actions, etc., for climate, but also for housing, immigration, education, other policy areas that the center works on. The second bullet point provides talking points and analysis for local governments on the impact of HR 1. And then the state resources includes the state policy dashboard, which tracks state climate policy across the country. It's a great resource for understanding what other states are doing. The CPRG project inventory, that's what I said earlier. It has a list of hundreds of CPRG applications. I just checked in California, there are over 100 clean energy projects in the inventory. So these are projects that already have partners figured out. It has points of contact, how much funding is needed, so many details that can help streamline a project. L4GG's resource page has so many amazing resources on the tax credits, on grant funding, on navigating legal threats. Definitely worth reviewing. And then for resources for awardee support, the first link is a guidebook from a collaboration from a few organizations, including L4GG and the National League of Cities, that provide technical assistance and resources for grantees who are looking to find find funding and protect their funding, as well as a link to L4GG's legal clinic for those organizations who might be experiencing clawbacks from the federal government. And the last list of resources are just some helpful analysis on legal threats around the clawbacks. So I know that was a lot. There's a lot going on, but hopefully this overview is really helpful for you. As I promised, we will get into the tax credits, and I'll have Sandie take over there.
Thanks, Michaela. Really appreciate it. I know it's a lot of information, and like I said, we'll send out these slides with links afterwards. And this is hopefully for some of y'all just getting you familiar with this information, and maybe for some other folks, this is letting you dive a little bit deeper into understanding what's going on. But I'm Sandie. I'm the chief of staff at S3 Strategies. I suppose I should introduce myself. I actually used to live in Mammoth Lakes, California, though I never skied on the mountain. I used to run as part of the Mammoth Lakes Track Club there with Dina Castor, if anybody knows her, California legend. And recently I saw somebody was from the Big Sur area and got up to Carmel by the Sea recently. So excited to be speaking with y'all in particular. So S2 Strategies, we help states and work with state governments primarily, as well as some local governments, understand the federal landscape as well as meet their clean energy goals. So we can actually skip forward 2 slides. I'll get right into it. I'm going to talk a little bit fast, but I'm so happy to follow up and spend more time one-on-one with anybody on this call. But some key takeaways I think Michaela talked about is that unfortunately the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or HR 1, is going to increase household energy costs. It's going to eliminate jobs, and it's going to undermine grid reliability. But understanding the impacts of it, we can help prevent some of that from happening, at least in California. So if you'll go forward 2 slides, we'll jump into commercial tax credits. So this is not residential. This is large scale commercial clean energy tax credits in order of expiration here. So a little bit deeper of what Michaela was presenting. So 45W or commercial clean vehicles. If vehicles are acquired before September 30th, they're still eligible September 30th this year for that tax credit. For alternative fuel vehicle refueling property, so things like EV chargers, if it's placed into service before June 30th of next year, then it's eligible. So if you have any of these projects in your pipeline, these are the 2 highest priority for commercial tax credits. This third piece we'll dive into a little bit deeper. These are the really big tax credits for solar and wind commercial properties had the biggest impact. And then there's a secondary impact on zero emissions technologies that has some exceptions, but solar and wind projects that are taking advantage of tax credits or plan to at the commercial scale, there's a really big sprint to want to commence construction of these projects, which there's a few ways in order to meet that requirements before the end of this year. And that is because some new restrictions called prohibited foreign entity restrictions kick in at the beginning of next year if they do not start construction before the end of this year. And we'll get into that timeline in a second, but if you know one thing and take away one thing, if you have a solar and wind commercial project, you want to help them take advantage of this tax credit, the #1 gold star thing you can do is commence construction before the end of this year. Your silver medal in this, I'm a former track athlete, so I'm going to speak in these terms, is you commence construction on that project before July 4th of 2026. And you have consulted with a tax lawyer and you ensure that you're going to meet these new prohibited foreign entity restrictions if you plan on and your project relies on getting this tax credit. And then the bronze medal after that is you want this tax credit, you just have to place a project in service and meet prohibited foreign entity restrictions by the end of 2027. So those are kind of the 3 timelines to have in mind for solar and wind project. In some good news, there are zero emissions energy technologies, which includes batteries that are connected to solar or wind, but just the batteries can still take advantage of tax credits on the previous timeline of 2033. They just have to abide by these prohibited foreign entity rules. So really recommend reaching out to Lawyers for Good Government, EPN, and get connected to some legal and tax resources to make sure you're fully understanding what these new restrictions are. We'll go to the next slide. Great. So I think this probably doesn't apply for most of y'all, but for advanced manufacturing, for clean hydrogen, clean fuel, advanced clean hydrogen and advanced manufacturing, you're still eligible until 2027, the end of 2027. Clean fuel eligible until 2029. And then there's this other and some good news piece, which is that geothermal heat pumps, which I know a lot of schools are taking advantage of through direct pay, and I know Michaela, you said this too, have the full credit before 2033 is what this should say. I'll fix that one, and then have a 2-year phase down, and they don't have to apply by these new prohibited foreign entity rules. So that's great news, and there's a lot of schools I know in particular taking advantage of that. We'll go to the next slide. So to get a little more granular on what this means, so before this bill, these credits, as most of y'all probably understood them, were technology neutral. Now they are not. So there's solar and wind, and then there's other zero emission technologies as we were just talking about. And the big things that changed is that solar and wind have a rapid elimination, and they are now all, except for geothermal heat pumps, have to abide by prohibited foreign entity rules. We'll go to the next slide. If you're hearing me say commence construction and you're like, what does that mean? It's not necessarily simple, but it does have guidelines, and really recommend you read this detailed overview, especially on how elective pay projects can meet that commence construction definition from Lawyers for Good Government I have linked in this slide, but effectively there's two kind of conditions. One is a physical work test, so like installing the foundations, anchors, like this, they have a really detailed definition of what it means to meet the physical work test of beginning of construction, or what most projects do is meet this 5% project cost safe harbor. So look into for your projects what this might mean. I think I would definitely say most folks go for the 5% project cost safe harbor. That means they reach commence construction, and really that looks like 10% of the project, because we all know project costs change. But recommend you look into this Lawyer for Good Government resource, and happy to answer any more specific questions. And then one thing to look out for going forward is that there was an executive order that might change some of these thresholds, but until that comes out, it is all speculative. And there's been a lot of pushback from even folks that passed this bill on that changing, since this has been codified in law for quite a long time. So look out for that. Lawyers for Government is going to have the latest, and I'm also always happy to be on hand to answer questions. So go to the next slide. Thanks. And then you heard me say prohibited foreign entity restrictions. You can think of this as entities that have ties to China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and other entities, but those are the big ones. And most projects probably have ties to China that are clean energy projects. That's what you might want to look out for, because a lot of our products come through there. And they kind of go into these really different pieces, but the one that kicks in starting next year is this material assistance requirement. So it's how much or percent total of a project is getting material assistance from a foreign entity, and that's starting next year. So this is the one that's really going to be a kicker, I think, for a lot of projects, and it's the one to be most careful about, and to really ensure that you and any projects you're working with understand whether they're in your city that you want to take advantage of a tax credit for, or they're with a developer that you're working with. Really recommend consulting with a tax lawyer. And I know Lawyers for Good Government is going to give out some pro bono resources on that front to help get you started. But unfortunately, I think some of these are quite complex. I linked a really good resource if you are a nerd like me and you want to deep dive for yourself into what you should expect and might be expecting, and encourage you to check that out on this slide when we send them out. We'll go to the next slide. Awesome. So you're thinking, okay, cool. What can you do now for commercial tax credits? If you're a city, municipality, if you have solar, wind, and storage projects, really recommend you looking into how you can avoid these new FEOC or foreign entity of concern restrictions by commencing construction this year. If you can construct starting next year, make sure that you understand what that means. You're consulting with tax lawyers, you're consulting with folks that can dive deep with you. And that if you have a vehicles related projects, I know a lot of cities do in the commercial way, just make sure you understand that the vehicle side terminates September 30th of this year. And then the refueling, which is the EV chargers, is June 30th of next year. So I'll breeze through the next section, but if we'll keep going, next one is residential energy credits. So this is a timeline in order of expiration of the residential or consumer tax credits. So first up, new EV and used EV vehicles have to be acquired by consumers before September 30th. So same timeline as commercial. Heat pumps, air conditioners, and heaters, installations before the 31st. Same with heat pump water heaters, weatherization and insulation, electric panels, all installations must be made before the end of this year. If we'll go to the next slide. If you're getting a home energy audit, or folks you know are, or doing rooftop solar, battery storage, geothermal, all of that geothermal heating installation, all of that has to be, all the installations have to be made before the end of this year in order to be eligible. And then if you're going for an EV charger as a consumer, it has to be placed in service, same as the commercial tax credit timeline, before June 30th of 2026. We'll go to the next slide. If there's one thing you do from this today, we have a really great toolkit. You can copy and paste emails, social, there's graphics that are included that are not labeled with anybody's organization that you can use to communicate these timelines to your constituents, to folks that you work with that might be wanting to take advantage of residential tax credits, they are still available. They just have new timelines. And folks that want more information, resources, we have really great emails and social media copy already drafted for you to share that. Thanks. Awesome. So just quick 2 conclusions, takeaways. I'll hand it back over to Angie. But just some things to watch for is a lot of these tax credits, again, rely on administrative rulemaking. So that commence construction requirement, that 5%, that starting work, it might change because of executive orders. And I really recommend you get on the Lawyers for Good Government mailing list and make sure you're up to date. But if you ever have a question, you have our, me and Michaela's contacts, and we're always happy to make sure you're connected to the right people. And then there is a lot of ongoing litigation, as has already been talked about in this moment. So not always related to the tax credits, but related to other things that I know y'all are concerned and relying on for these projects. And then I just want to recognize that a lot of the burden for picking up the slack and understanding things is on y'all, and you already have a lot of limited resources. So any way in which we can help, always here to be that resource, but also just thank you for doing this work. And then lastly, on the next slide, I think there's one more, if I'm not wrong. Maybe that's it.
That was it.
Okay, awesome. Great. Okay, great. I will throw in one more graphic that's like easier to understand, but thank you all so much for your time. I know some of this is quite complex, and Angie, I'll hand it back to you.
Well, thank you, Sandie and Michaela. We have the smartest friends, and I just want to say thanks to those organizations who are doing such good work trying to ease the burden of all of this on the communities that really need to stay focused, right? So thanks for bringing all those resources. It was actually a state agency that introduced me to S2 strategies. So now you're on my watch list of folks with good resources. And thanks to Michaela, we had talked, and I was like, hey, can you help us look at what's happening in other states? Sometimes we only look at California. And so she did a little extra digging. So just saying some thanks. There is some good engagement happening here in the chat, guys, and we may go into our bonus breakout overtime here. One question, I'm going to highlight some things and lift them up, even if they were answered, because I do want them in the recording for others that couldn't join us. Tiffany's asking about the BRIC ruling. What does it mean for local governments practically who have BRIC grants? And Michaela responded, unfortunately, it's still paused, and funding will not be yet be released, and the lawsuit is prohibiting the federal government from repurposing or using the BRIC funds for other purposes. So right now it's just restricting it from being used for other purposes. And then a lot of you, I feel like this is our huddle all over again, our federal huddle, a lot of commiserating here and helping each other out with federal funds and where you're at with it. So a shout out again here for Lawyers for Good Government from Jody, and sounds like she's had some good success, I think, working with them on her EPA grant. Poor Omri having a difficult time here with the DOE grant, where it's being effectively on pause. Tiffany having some challenges with EECBG block grant. Just folks saying they're having a hard time hearing back, I think, from some of these agencies. Folks are helping each other on CFI round 2 award, and having some difficulty with non-responsiveness. And let's see, yeah, just folks not hearing back, and I hear that all over the place. So you guys are not alone. Crickets, same from SMUD. Okay, EECBG again. And then a lot of questions from Alice, so let's go to those. I'm trying to assist a small nonprofit to receive direct pay tax credit rebates. Has anyone recently filed the pre-forms and received their checks for solar and or battery? I see it answered, but maybe Michaela, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Sorry, which is that question?
Alice is trying to assist a small nonprofit receiving direct pay tax credit rebates, and she's asking if anybody has recently filed the pre-forms and received their checks. Oh, it was somebody else that said we recently submitted tax forms for solar and battery backup on our town hall. But that's a question for either of you on tax credits.
From my understanding, as recent as like this January and February, direct pay entities were still receiving their direct pay checks. I also know that the IRS is still holding their direct pay office hours. So it could be worth bringing up that question during the office hours. I can also drop the link to it. And yeah, the pre-filing registration portal is still open. So I'm not 100, I don't really know what the timeline between sending the direct pay, like filing for direct pay and when checks are received. Sandy, do you know? I think it varies.
Yes, what you're saying is true. One resource I will put in here from Lawyers for Good Government has guidance on pre-filing, and they have a registration tool if that's what you might need. I would say the timeline has slowed down significantly because they are understaffed, not because they are not sending out checks. So folks are getting them a lot slower. I work with Washington State government on their direct pay program, and we have had folks receive their checks in the last few months. And if you do not receive it within the timeline in which you are promised, you are eligible for interest on that amount. So just make sure that you know that. And I really recommend the pre-filing tool and portal that L4GG has too. But they do have an office hour, I think, every Wednesday, and there's one coming up on the 20th, the IRS does.
And I dropped a link to that in the chat.
Another question here. Do the dates for commercial tax credits like EV charging also apply to nonprofits through the direct pay? So the answer is yes.
Yeah, the changes to the tax credits apply to the tax credit. So, if it's a direct pay entity or a private business that's using the tax credit, the underlying credit is what's changed.
Okay. And then Brooks asking, are all these deadlines the same for residential? And maybe we got to that because you ended up bringing up a slide on residential. So Brooke, let us know if you need more there. Alice is asking, do the dates for commercial tax credits? Oh, sorry. You've already answered that. So Alice is also asking, how does someone ascertain the material assistance percentage of content for solar or batteries that would be disallowed or make installation ineligible by whatever the date is for direct pay?
I think, Michaela, you put this resource in there, but the Tax Law Center has really great tables, and it's about halfway through a very long document, really getting into the nitty-gritty on all the different pieces of prohibited foreign entities, which includes material assistance. So there's a lot of parity to the domestic content bonus, if you're familiar with that. But if you scroll about halfway down into that resource, there's cost ratio equals, as well as tables that you can use. And it's the same for commercial and direct pay. Like Michaela said, it's direct pay just takes advantage of the commercial credit that is underlying it.
Okay, well, those are the questions from the chat, and I am glad that you really touched on the commencing construction in a deep way. I think that's good. That's what the question I hear over and over again is just, what does it mean to commence construction by this date, July 4th, 2026? So I'm sure there's more guidance coming even down the pike on that. So you guys keep me posted. If there's more stuff I can distribute to this network, I would love to. We will grab everything we can out of here, out of the chat that's been shared, and you all will receive not just the slides, but we always wrap up all the materials and resources that have been shared in the meeting. So you get all of it. Please join me in thanking Sandie and Michaela for spending the time with us. So appreciate it. You two, come back again sometime. And if you wouldn't mind, before you go, if you want to drop your email, however you want to be contacted as an organization, can you drop that here in the chat just so it's easy for folks to get back in touch with you? That would be great. Okay, maybe we can put our last couple of slides up, wrap us up for our official hour, and then we'll keep it going in the bonus breakout for those that would like to and can join us. So that was our August meeting for the most part. And in September, we are going to be talking about community benefits agreements. So I just wanted to let you know that that's already in the works. We've got some great speakers. You might be saying, what is a community benefits agreement? It's not the same thing as a community benefits plan. We heard a little bit about it at the SEEK Forum from a couple of speakers, including Kate Gordon. And it turns out there's some real experts out here. It's a funding opportunity that's locally based. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about what that might mean for you all and what the latest information and best practices are out there around California and other places. So please do invite a friend. And I think with that, you're getting lots of thank yous, guys, in the chat. So everybody's seeming like this was really useful. I'm going to think more. I kind of miss our federal huddles, and I feel like we do need to like check back in on this federal stuff maybe on a quarterly basis and get the updates. So let's be thinking about that. With that, I'm going to close this out of our official hour and then turn this over to so if you have to go, thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next month. And if you want to stay, let's go to our next slide. That will be our bonus breakout, which our network always seems to sort of appreciate having a little informal time. This is where we're less structured here. This is an opportunity for anybody here who would like to offer an announcement, success story, or opportunity in your neck of the woods. If you have a need for information, you're looking for collaborators or advice, this is an opportunity to share